Imagine a man so invisible, so ordinary, that not a single guard could remember his face, and yet he managed to outthink the prison system from the inside. No violence, no tunnels, no chaos, just strategy, patience, and a kind of quiet genius that left investigators stunned. This is the true story of the inmate who didn't break out of prison. He intellectually slipped through it, using nothing more than paperwork, timing, and an understanding of human behavior so precise it forced the entire correction system to rewrite their procedures. And the most surprising part? His plan worked, until one tiny detail exposed everything. Could you have spotted it? Today, we dive into one of the most astonishing prison manipulation cases ever recorded, and how one man outsmarted an entire system built to contain him. Before he became known as the Ghost, his name was Elias Harper. To anyone on the outside, Elias was the definition of unremarkable. Late 30s, soft-spoken, worked odd jobs, no long criminal history, no reputation that preceded him. He wasn't physically intimidating. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't the loudest, the strongest, or the most feared. But he had something far more dangerous inside a system that thrives on routine. He paid attention. And that one trait would allow him to manipulate a prison without raising his voice or suspicion. Elias first entered the state correctional system after a nonviolent fraud conviction, a detail that becomes extremely important later. He wasn't sent to a maximum security facility. He didn't need heavy monitoring. He didn't set off any psychological red flags. So when he was transferred to Briarwood Correctional Center, the staff didn't think twice. In fact, the intake officer would later tell investigators, he didn't stand out. Not in a good way, not in a bad way. He was background noise. But there was one detail about Briarwood that prison officials overlooked. The facility was understaffed. And in understaffed environments, paperwork becomes the oxygen the system breathes. Thousands of forms, constant transfers, movement logs, shift reports, housing changes. Briarwood was drowning in documents, and Elias was about to swim through them like a professional. Most inmates adjust slowly during their first week. Elias didn't. He watched, silently, carefully, every time a guard walked past, every clipboard they carried, every time someone set a file down and forgot to pick it back up. He noticed which officers rushed through shift changes, which ones trusted routine instead of double-checking forms, which desks were left momentarily unattended, which parts of the day were the busiest, and most importantly, which processes relied purely on trust rather than verification. And Briarwood, like many institutions, had a blind spot: internal movement logs, a small stack of carbon copy papers that determined where each inmate was supposed to be, for classes, medical checks, work assignments, meetings, and transfers. In theory, flawless. In practice, extremely vulnerable. Because if a form looked legitimate, most officers didn't question it. And Elias noticed that very quickly. He wasn't trying to escape, at least not at first. His goal was much simpler: make prison life easier. Elias hated the crowded, noisy dorms. He just wanted some peace and quiet. But in prison, solitude is a privilege you have to earn, not just ask for. Then he noticed something brilliant. Medical movement slips weren't cross-checked with the clinic until the end of the day. If your slip said you had an appointment, everyone just assumed you did. So, he wrote a pass for himself. He didn't forge a signature. He just copied the format onto a blank slip. He walked to the clinic, sat down, and waited. When a nurse told him he wasn't on the list, Elias just shrugged and said, "Must be a mistake in the log." She checked, and since the paper looked official, she gave him a quick checkup. Just like that, he proved the system could be bent. 3 months into his sentence, Elias found the prison's ultimate weakness: transfer documents. Not the big, external ones, but simple internal transfers between wings. These were handled with trust, routine, and rushed signatures, especially during chaotic shift changes. An analyst later called it a quiet catastrophe waiting to happen. Elias tested his theory. He walked up to a guard's desk with a self-made transfer request to a low-supervision unit. The guard barely glanced at it, initialed it, stamped it, and told him to pack. Just like that, he transferred himself. But this wasn't about comfort. It was about building a reputation as a quiet, cooperative, low-risk inmate. He was studying the system, learning every rotation, every blind spot, every overwhelmed desk. He realized the morning court transport logs were pure chaos. He could create a phantom court order, a believable request to attend a hearing that didn't exist. The plan? Get dropped off at the courthouse and simply disappear in the confusion. It was brilliant. But right before he could execute it, something unexpected happened that changed everything. Before Elias Harper made his most ambitious move, the phantom court transfer, something inside Briarwood Correctional Center shifted. And ironically, it came from a single new officer whose job wasn't even related to inmate movement. Her name was Officer Janessa Clark. Not a veteran guard. Not someone hardened or complacent. She was fresh out of the academy, sharp, focused, and exactly the type of person Elias did not want around during the most delicate phase of his plan. Officer Clark was assigned to administrative rotation, which meant she spent most of her early days sorting mail, entering data into the system, filing forms, completing intake logs, assisting with cross-department communication, boring work to most people. But she approached paperwork with the seriousness of a federal auditor. And she noticed details. On her second week, she authored an internal note. Some movement slips are inconsistently formatted. Suggest creating a standardized checklist. Supervisors skimmed the message, then dismissed it. They were used to the messiness of Briarwood. But Elias noticed her. She was the first person in months who didn't trust the flow of documents blindly. The first person who actually looked at the forms instead of just stamping them. That made her dangerous. But she had one weakness. Because she was new, she wasn't yet assigned to morning transport duty, which meant Elias still had a window. But her attention to detail would play a critical role later. Elias waited. 4 weeks. He studied the schedules for any morning wear. Transport volume was high, supervisors with thin paperwork, traffic was heavy, and, most importantly, Officer Clark was off duty or assigned elsewhere, and he finally found it. A Monday near the end of spring. On the calendar, 18 inmates scheduled for court, 9 medical runs, 2 inter-facility transfers, a set of administrative reviews. 3 visiting attorneys arriving early. It was the exact kind of chaos that buried small discrepancies. A perfect morning. Elias prepared 3 nights before, not by forging signatures, not by copying official seals, not by cutting or breaking anything, but simply by mimicking the formatting he had memorized for months. A font style, a spacing pattern, a header alignment. He crafted a movement slip so ordinary it was invisible. The request read, temporary custody, Superior Court, 9 a.m. inmate, Harper, Elias, nonviolent, civil hold review, nothing dramatic, nothing suspicious. But he added the one line that would ensure the system accepted it without question. Return same day, standard escort. Why was that line important? Because it removed the need for any supervisor to initiate extra procedures. Just another civil hearing. Just another inmate leaving at 9 a.m. and returning by noon. And then, the morning arrived. What happens next is one of the simplest, yet most remarkable examples of system dependency ever recorded. Transport mornings at Briarwood were noisy, crowded, and tense. Clipboards stacked. Guards signing fast. Phones ringing. Inmate names being called out in batches. Elias walked into the holding line like he belonged there. Because at this point, he had spent months building a reputation for being predictable, helpful, and good with paperwork. He held the slip calmly. The officer glanced at it, checked the time, saw the header, stamped it, and moved to the next inmate. Just like that, he was approved to leave the prison. No alarms, no debate, no supervisor questioning it. The same guard would later testify. It looked like every other slip. I had 20 forms in my hand. I wasn't scrutinizing fonts. Elias was moved to the transport staging area, a quiet hallway where inmates wait before they rechained for external movement. He Saturday, hands still, face neutral. He had successfully inserted himself into an external transport list. And then came the first unexpected problem. 2 guards arriving late. It seemed small, but small delays create opportunities, both good and bad. Because of the delay, officers began rearranging the transport order. One inmate who was supposed to go first was moved to the back. Another was temporarily sent to a different room. A supervisor reordered the list verbally. This was dangerous for Elias. Too much scrutiny during reshuffling could expose an anomaly. A guard called out, "Harper, civil review, courthouse 2. Elias nodded once. The guard double-checked his slip. Nodded back. No suspicion. But that pause, that moment of review, would come back later in the investigation. Back then, it was harmless. They placed him in the van, strapped him in, logged his departure, and the doors closed. He was now outside the prison walls. Legally. Because on paper, he was exactly where the system believed he should be. Transport vans don't move quietly. They arrive loudly. Officers communicate. Clipboards move. Radio calls happen. And when Elias arrived at the courthouse, everything looked normal. Except for one thing. No one inside the courthouse was expecting an inmate named Elias Harper. The front desk clerk scanned the list. Frowned. Harper. That name's not on the docket. The officer escorting Elias shrugged. Check the civil panel. Might be an admin oversight. The clerk checked again. Nothing. This is usually where escape stories become dramatic. Fights, running, chaos. But Elias didn't do any of that. He remained calm, silent, respectful. He knew confusion favored him. While the escorting officer walked to a supervisor, Elias was escorted to a side waiting room. This room wasn't locked. It was meant for short-term holding, a place where low-risk inmates sit until paperwork is verified. Exactly the environment Elias had studied for months. And then, almost too perfectly, the escorting officer stepped away to make a phone call. A simple verification call. A call that would inevitably reveal the truth. But he hadn't made it yet. He walked down the hall to find better reception, leaving Elias alone, unwatched, and milliseconds away from the moment he had been engineering for half a year. He stood. He walked to the hallway. He blended with the civilian flow. Nobody noticed. Not because he was disguised, but because he looked like any other visitor, quiet, neutral, carrying nothing, walking like he had somewhere to be. And as he exited the courthouse lobby, Elias Harper simply walked away. No breaking, no sneaking, no fleeing, just absence. For 22 minutes, no one realized he was gone. For 43 minutes, the system still believed he was in a courtroom. And for nearly 3 hours, he was officially in transit. Until the call came. And this is where the story turns in a direction even Elias didn't anticipate. Because the moment he walked out of that courthouse, a chain of events started inside Briarwood, a chain triggered by a single unexpected person. Someone who wasn't supposed to check anything that morning. Someone who wasn't even working near transport duty. But someone who noticed one detail. Officer Janessa Clark. In the end, Elias Harper didn't break walls, overpower guards, or outrun law enforcement. He didn't rely on force, chaos, or fear. What he used was observation, patience, and an understanding of human routine so sharp that a single sheet of paper nearly unraveled an entire system. His story isn't about escaping prison. It is about exposing the hidden weaknesses inside it. Weaknesses built not from bad intentions, but from everyday habits. Rushed mornings, stacked paperwork, trusted routines. And while Elias didn't get the ending he hoped for, his quiet attempt forced correctional facilities across the state to rewrite policies, tighten procedures, and finally confront a reality they had ignored for years. A system is only as strong as the details people stop paying attention to. Elias Harper didn't outfight the prison. He outthought it. And even though his plan didn't succeed, the lesson he left behind still echoes through every guard station, every shift change, and every stack of movement slips to this day. Thank you for watching. If you want more stories about how ordinary people exposed extraordinary flaws within the justice system, make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning.